This here is my Sanyo RD7 cassette deck. I've had it since it was brand new. It was my first cassette deck and I bought it in 1982. They made these between 82 and 83 and then they moved on to another line. Of course, gotta have stuff out there for people to buy. It's a pretty basic model. It has line inputs for mics, which are mono. It's one-way tape. You have to actually flip it over to change direction so it's not auto reverse. It does have level inputs. You can move the gains up to about 3.5, 4 dB, I believe, so you can balance your recordings, whether they actually go through the mics or you're just recording off another source. Real basic. As I said, I've had it since new. It does have some issues. It's one of the reasons why it's been sitting in a closet probably for the last 20 years. As you can see, the control for the tape is kind of flopping around there, but I believe I can fix that because I have before in the past. One of the issues I'm running across is finding belts for this. It's no easy task, and that's one of the reasons why I gave up on it the last time. I do need to replace my input-output cables. I really don't think masking tape is the way to go with these, but when you're desperate and a kid, you do what desperate kids do. Then it just actually needs to be cleaned, and that's if I can find the belts for it. So the first thing I need to do is take it apart, find out what belts are in it, because you can't order them for a Sanyo RD7. Let's get moving. Talk about an exploded view of a Sanyo RD7. I've seen horror movies that didn't look this bad. You still have a little bit more to take apart, but our belts already quote unquote fell out, so we're not so worried about that. And these little guys, as you can see, it's not very flexible, are not the issue. It's this guy here, the belt. And since I have it, I can now order it. But it will require a little more disassembly to get it apart, but I'd rather do that while I'm actually getting ready to reassemble it so I don't, kind of forget things over a couple days. I still need to take these two switches out because I need to take this whole faceplate off. As you can see, that's not supposed to do that. I believe it's supposed to be in this notch, and somehow I've got it wired up over here with what looks like some stripped twist ties or something of that nature. Pretty innovative when you're 14, 15 years old. So I need to take those off yet, and then I can pull the wires out of the back and replace those. And with a quick Amazon order, the deal is done and we're just waiting on the postman. Okay, while I'm waiting on belts to arrive, what I found here is my old repair, and right here still seems to be attached, but this end seemed to have popped out. We went ahead and removed the keys, and this point right here sits right in this little slot. On this side, this slot is broken. I'm gonna have to find some plastic and some super glue and kind of build that up. I really don't want to build it all the way down to the bottom, but that may actually be an option. Just means that I won't be able to get the front case loader out if I need to without actually taking that back out. It has been 40 plus years. I haven't taken it out yet, so I don't know if it's going to be a real critical decision. I went ahead and I found this old spatula in the garage, made it hard plastic, and I've been whittling on it for a little while over here with my knife. And I cut this little piece out here, and that fits in that slot. I can find my other piece here. And this one goes in like so. And that way it'll allow this arm to move back and forth, which opens and closes the door, and there'll be actually a L-shaped or a box for the shaft to sit in. At least that's the plan. I think my glue is dry, so I can take my spacers out. Wanted to make sure the glue didn't actually come in contact with this arm, because as I said, this is the door. It actually opens and closes. And if it doesn't open and close, then there's really no point in doing this. But I was just sitting here thinking, well, before I took it out there, that how times have changed. Back when I was like 15, I first fixed this. I think I used this, probably it looks like a Bic cap of some kind. Wired it up in there and stuffed this big cap down in there to make sure it didn't actually, that was what was taking the pressure down, and the wire was preventing the pole from coming out. Today I go out to the garage, I find something that's been sitting around forever, whip out a little super glue. I remember back then super glue was a new invention and us poor kids didn't have that stuff. And now I've got 22s of it. How times have changed. But man, I tell you, that plastic, that's one thing super glue will do, is that it bonds to this plastic so perfectly. That's what it's really kind of designed to do. And I'm putting in the same exact kind of plastic, that hard, you know, such, and it's built a perfect shelf here. I may take it out to the garage and do a little trimming, but the reality is I don't think I need to do anything at all. I've just created a perfect cure. Okay, here we are at the kitchen sink, where all good audio equipment must visit at least once in its career. And went ahead and soaking everything down with a little simple green here. See if we can get 40 years of usage off of it before we actually put it back together. And now they get to sit on the foyer and dry out real good. Now we can actually get our keys put back in place. I went ahead and I put a little piece of cardboard, a shim over here. The shaft fits in between here and it allowed it to slide back and forth a little bit, and I think that was the Achilles heel of the whole deal, because it would slide right out to this edge and all that pressure pushing down on these keys would be right here. And it just, I think this is the record side, so sometimes you push the record button and the little tape tab thing in the top is plucked out, in which case it won't allow the record button to go down, in which case it just stops, and that's when all the pressure came right on this edge and broke it out. Long story short, little piece of a matchbook right there, and I think it's all set. Now I'm going to go ahead and set this guy in. Of course they'll all fall because, you know, there's no spring behind them to hold them up, but at least they're not laying down on one side and broken. Alright, with that accomplished, we're going to move on to the next one. We have gingerly turned our tape deck over. Surprisingly, a lot of this, like the mechanism, is actually hardwired. There is no plugs to be able to take it apart, and I really don't want to start separating a bunch of wires, so we're just going to leave that attached and try to be as careful as possible. The real objective is these wires. As you can see, I probably had some bad ends at some point and went ahead and put some new ends on. Well, the masking tape is now 30 plus years old and it's not really holding up so well. And to eliminate all of this, all the way up to here, I planned on doing it inside the new connection. I really planned on doing it down here on this board, but after sitting here staring at it for about 15 minutes, I decided that I'm not going to do the board. I'm going to trim it back here somewhere and tin it up with my soldering stuff down there and put some two nice decent connections together. That way they don't have any chance to come apart. It won't be outside of the tape case and it will function as well. Some people are a little worried about shielding. I mean, come on. I mean, one's an input, one's an output, so I mean, maybe one channel would bleed over on the other, but I don't think that would happen anyway. Even the best of us, and I ain't saying I'm the best of us by a long shot, but I'm sitting here and I'm putting these new cables together, and I clipped them off so I could get them out of this, you know, harness over here. About halfway through stripping some wires here, it dawned on me what was going to be left channel and what was going to be right channel. And it just like flew right past me, and I'm like, oh no, I better get that other piece out and find out exactly how it was cut off and match those two up, and then I'll know which one's which. And they're all color coded. Red's right, white's left. Back to work. We went ahead and tinned all the ends of our wires. That way they're already nice and put together. And man, you got to stay up on this shrink wrap. It's got to be 5 steps ahead at all times. Now I've got this one that's going to cover the whole wire. And these green ones up here are going to cover the hot wires. And hopefully they'll shrink down enough to where one will go over top of the other one. We're about to find out. In the process of putting all this together, we did use an extra piece of shrink wrap all the way out here, and it actually extends beyond the body about, I don't know, ½ inch, and that way the wire doesn't tend to want to bend right there at that edge. Not that it's really going to be pulled around much, but just as safety's sake. And it also helped because while the wire was hot, it was really flexible, and you could just boop, 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 and stick it right in place. When it was cold, it was a bit more difficult. So now I've gone ahead and I've zip tied everything all the way down the line here. Turned out a whole lot better. I mean, we got these kind of ends instead of these kind of ends, which this one here is a bit innovative. I believe that's Scotch tape, and I just wrapped the ground wire around the back side of the wire so it wouldn't touch. You know, it's just input outputs. There's no power running through it. So we get rid of those, and our new leads are in place. And now we can move on to other things. Alright, before we do our final flip over here, we went ahead and we used some rubbing alcohol. We detailed the whole tape mechanism, the heads, the eraser head, the pinch rollers, everything, stanchions, all of it. Just made sure everything was nice and clean, nice and perfect. I don't know who the guy was that owned this before, but he took care of it real well, because apparently there wasn't a whole lot on it. Also found a little piece of plastic here that broke off this corner. Apparently it was in the box, but when we took it apart, it was just laying over here, and I thought, it's nothing, just another piece of plastic from somewhere. Then I noticed actually the corner that shows on the outside here, and so I pulled out our trusty super glue and put it back on. It's on to stay, and now I need to do the big flip, and I really need some belts to come in. Alright, once again we're revisiting our Realistic Nova 4 / Infinity QE speakers here. And I've gone ahead and decided to buy a mid-range. That was a little bit bigger than what was going on before. As you can see, we're going to have to cut this hole out. I'm going to just put a base blocker between it, because the QEs are two-way, so they're going to handle the woofer and they're going to handle the tweeter up in the corner, but they don't have anything to do with a mid-range. So I could have wired it direct, which, you know, would have been a full range, but I really didn't want it to be full range. I wanted it to be mid at least. So we went ahead and we just bought a base blocker, so to speak. And I'm going to go ahead and cut the boxes out, get this set in, put them back together. After a while, I got to solder in the base blocker. So we'll be back in a minute. Basically, I'm just leaving the Infinity QE two-way crossover like it is, and I'm just adding these two wires right to these power nubs here. They'll just be their own self-contained crossover. Thought I'd get a shot of them before I put the grills back on. Those little 5s over there are going to be a nice addition. At least they are on the other speaker already. Not bad for a set of hodgepodge speakers. Hey folks, It's been a while, about 5 weeks here. Been waiting on these belts to show up when I live 2 states away. 5 weeks. Got me a big mess over here. It's been pushed out of the way for other projects for a while, but it's time to pull the tape deck back out and get this thing finished up because I'm tired of looking at it in pieces. Now that took a little while to figure out which one was which. I measured what was left over of the belt over here, and it basically came down to about 3 sizes lower. I'm really glad I got the assortment pack, but at the moment now I apparently have about 150 extra belts. It took a couple times to put one in, see it didn't actually make contact the right way, take it back out, put another one in. And went back and forth, but I think I got all 3 of them out of our assortment packs, and now I think it's time to actually start putting the rest of it back together, if I remember how. Everything's been finished up. We got no extra screws or anything like that. We got our new input outputs on, of course. And it's not perfect, but neither was I at its age. Time for a test drive. Well, looks like we're going to get a 2-for-1 review today. We already had this turntable sitting around for about 18 years. It's comparable to my Girard that I used to have, and I really don't have a need for another turntable, so I'm going to be using this one in place of my Girard. But at the moment, it's in the way. It's time for this guy. Hello, my old friend. It's been a lot of years. The time has come to push the power button. Here we go. Ah, nice lights. Very nice, very nice. I remember being very impressed with a door that actually just doesn't slap open, you know, like the cassette decks used to do back in the day. I thought this, a little slower, was just the coolest thing. Yes. Alright, let's see if it works. Oh, fast forward works. Stop works. The buttons work. That's a plus. Rewind works. Let's rewind a little bit past the spot it was sitting on. Tape monitor down. So a little up close and personal review. Everything is working real well. The door is opening perfectly. All the keys are staying up real nice. Of course, the power works. All the switches seem to work well. These are very balanced. The cassettes that I've recorded and a couple others that I've tried have actually all been balanced, but there is 2 little LED adjuster switches right here. Just got to take the top off and you can adjust them to make them balanced a little more. Overall, the cleaning worked excellent. The plugs on the back are excellent. I mean, they were just easy plug in, no jiggling them around to make them work. All right, I've got some listening to do because I really want to give a clear judgment on what's going on here. Source is everything. Alright, that's pretty damn cool. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to record something off the radio with this brand new TDK cassette that I have been sitting around forever. So let's see if we can find something on the radio.
Stock's online savings account in minutes at Marcus.com. You can money.
Comparison made to the 3 largest U.S. banks measured by total taxes on February 4th, 2020 and may vary by state. Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC.
Brad Bellflower here. How does Apartments.com find the most rental listings? Bellflower here. How does Apartments.com find the most rental listings? Well, we use Pigeon. Yeah.
I keep reaching for the volume knob. Okay, this time around I'm going to take it from the turntable and I'm going to send it to the tape deck and see if a clean source going in will be a clean source going out. Well, I would call that a success. It sounds just like the album. I did make it what I would call back in the day a little hot. I had the gains up a little higher than they probably should have been, so it did have a little bit of peakiness to it, but you know, I would have listened to that once and said, yeah, I didn't like that, and go back. And the nice thing about a cassette deck is you hit rewind and push record again and do it all over again until you get it right. Okay. I'm 100% convinced that it's the source. That's all this receiver needs is a decent source, and it's good to go. A lot of the tapes I've been playing around with are in the neighborhood of 30 years old. Some of them have seen better days, even back when they were 5 years old. I've been giving it a grain of salt with what I've been playing with. I don't know, but I just, you know, did this recording here of what I was listening to on FM, and it sounded just like the FM that was just played prior to that. It does have a good quality, I think. It's not like a TAC reel-to-reel, but I mean, it is a $50-some Sanyo tape deck from 38 years ago. And that sounded pretty darn good. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give a review of both of these guys. As I said, I used to have a Gerard. This one's actually a little less than what the Gerard was. There is a huge difference between the tape deck and the turntable. Turntable, of course, albums are going to sound better, and it just is. I mean, this sounded really good, as I said. I mean, you can get some really good quality, but as you use that tape over and over again, they tend to lose their quality, and you know, and then if you use them, and then it just makes it that much worse. The sound quality of the turntable is excellent. I mean, excellent. And if I put on a old Saxon album from around that same period, it was one of the albums that I had as a teenager. I mean, you can imagine what's happened to this album since through my 20s and 30s and 40s. And it's been taped up in the whole 9 yards there, so, and it sounded so good. I mean, it really did. Each of these have their pluses and their negatives, of course. One problem I've always had with turntables is when you start really rocking, for some reason the tone arm always starts to pick up that sound. And one of the ways we used to get around that as kids is we'd take everything first run right off the album. So in case you actually wanted to listen to the album again, you could listen to it at reasonable levels. But when you wanted to like jam, I mean, you would just instantly stick it on a decent cassette tape. And that way the sound from the speakers, because you got to remember I had a bedroom at the time, and these speakers probably would only be about maybe 4 to 5 feet away from, at one point, away from the turntable, you know, and you get some things hopping and the tone arm would pick that stuff up. So everything would be like immediately transferred to cassette. But of course you always wanted that quality of the album when you were just sitting around doing things you probably shouldn't be. You'd always have that turntable and you'd always leave that album kind of pristine set away. I mean, I have albums I probably have played like 6, 7 times. You know, just because the cassette tape maybe came out as good, or you know, sometimes you listen to an album and you get kind of sick of the album after you've been dragging it around with you for 3 or 4 weeks and you don't listen to it much ever again. You know, so. As I'm sitting here, that sound sounds like it's coming right out of that receiver. Like there is no speakers that's coming out of that receiver. I guess you'd all call that imaging. This trick here only works when you're actually playing either the receiver or a turntable or another source. What we would do is you take your finger up here and you push the record button and you actually push that down. And then you would run the receiver and then you could actually crank up a whole lot more gain. That was a trick we used to use when we were kids, when you would get like a low recording from a radio station, or you would actually have a turntable over here. But again, turntables weren't the greatest for me when I was actually trying to jam, so it was kind of counterproductive. But it was always a neat little secret. I mean, it was like a preamp, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, because it was just, you tape monitor, you run through here, and it just jacks up the gains a little bit and then pumps it back through the receiver. So it's still a little surprising to me to be sitting here looking at a receiver that I did have, and it's not the actual one, but it's a exact replica of it, and my actual Sanyo 38-year-old tape deck sitting here jamming away. At one point I was pretty positive that that guy was going to sit in the closet forever. Broken belts, a format that is pretty much long forgotten, as well as these RS3As. I mean, they sat in a closet for 20 years, and when I got them, they were broken, so they sat broken in a closet for 20 years. And I gotta say, it's been a real discovery for me, because as I said, I thought my hearing has changed. I thought maybe I've relearned to the larger stereo overall. I mean, this is like a concert hall to a boombox. You know, I mean, it's really much different in what your actual perspective should be when you're looking at these two. But I do hear the same range of what I want to hear in a stereo system. Even when it comes to inexpensive brands, there's always brands that tend to be thought of fondly, and it's just because they outdid their expectations. Well, to me, this stuff so far is far outdid at my expectations. I do also see why I was very partial to certain recordings, and other recordings I would play and I would turn the speakers away from me. I would put pillows in front of, listen to in the next room, because it just sounded so much better. It was the limited technology you had to deal with at the time, and like in any situation, you compensate with what's available. And if it meant putting a pillow in front of the high end or the low end to try to make it sound a little deeper or a little banging, you know, it's what you did. With this combo, I had actually reached my teenage years, and I was on my way to 14. I am highly impressed with this whole setup so far. I have to say, there is something lacking, and again, it goes to quality of recordings, which I have always been a proponent of. There's some recordings out there, like 5%, that deserve the top end of the top end systems. And then there's the other 95% that deserves a clock radio from Walmart, as far as I'm concerned. And they need to be fixed, because what do you do if you got a song you absolutely love but just sounds horrible? And I'm going to have to come up with a solution for that, because I already, you know, I have found that my Rush album sounds great, you know. My Go-Go's album sounds horrible. So it's just what it is. And I want to be able to fix that. So that's something I'm going to have to come up with in the next video. But for now, like always, until the next video, whoa, you didn't like that.
like that.